Hello, here I'm going to go over how you make CoIP figures starting from a scan of your separate blots. So here I have 4 different blots that I'm going to be incorporating, blot 1, 2, 3, and 4, that have been scanned at 300 dpi, that's dots per inch. So the first step is to open up your scanned TIFF file in Photoshop and select a region around your first blot using the rectangular marquee tool, which can be reached either by clicking here or by pressing M. Then, if its style is normal, you're ready to drag around the first region containing your first blot. Copy that with Control C, open up a new document within Photoshop using Control N, and the new document will be set to the size of your clipboard, so what you've copied. So that's great, we'll open that, press Create, paste in your blot, and now we're going to align it using the crop tool, which you can also get to by pressing C. To line up or straighten your blot between the separate molecular weight markers, drag on the outside in the crop tool. So I'm going to focus on aligning these upper 2 molecular weight markers because they're closest to the bands that I care about most. So I think that looks pretty good to me. After I've straightened out the image, I'll crop in to remove the molecular weight markers on the left side here and crop in from the right. And I'll include the molecular weight markers on the right side. So something like that looks about right. And then these lanes in here are the actual results I care about. Cropping up from the bottom, I'll crop to about there, which is intermediate between these 2 markers. Sometimes the lanes don't run exactly the same. I try to take the average where possible. From the top, I'll go in, I won't go right to where my bands are because that looks kind of suspicious in a final figure. I'll leave it a little bit above that. So I think that looks pretty good for cropping. To follow through and crop, I'll press Enter now. So here I have my cropped image. Here is where you might want to adjust the brightness or contrast. So go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast. I find that adjusting the brightness to around 50 and contrast to maybe 70 or 80 tends to look good. What you want to avoid when you're adjusting brightness and contrast is adding any additional artifacts. So for example, if I use the legacy version of brightness and contrast by clicking here and up the contrast, you can see this looks ridiculous. Even if it's less severe, you don't want completely dark blotches. You don't want to lose any information when you're adjusting brightness contrast. So I'll go back to the new version, adjust brightness and contrast. I think that looks pretty good, so I'll press OK. Now we're going to adjust the size of the blot. I like to adjust the size so it's 50 pixels per lane, which tends to look quite good in a published figure. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lanes, including the ladder. So if we go to Image and Image Size, which you can also reach by pressing Control-Alt-I, you'll see that the current width is 618 pixels instead of the 9 lanes times 50 pixels, so 450 pixels that we'd like it to be. Before we adjust that, we'll quickly make sure that image size is set to resample. There are a bunch of different algorithms you can use. I prefer bicubic for smooth gradients. We'll also make sure that the proportions are constrained, so width and height are linked together here. If there are no lines going between them, they are not linked, so you want these little lines to be there. Now I'll change the width to 450 and click OK, and it shrunk a little bit. And here I'm going to actually copy the entire blot because we've finished processing it in Photoshop. So to select everything, press Control A, and then copy it with Control C. Now we'll go to Illustrator and open up a new document with Control N. The normal document that we would open is letter size, so 612 by 792 point, with one artboard and an RGB color. So we'll open that up. Immediately, I like to add the grid lines to the document, which you can do by Control and the quotation mark key, so just left of the Enter. Now we'll paste in the blot, Control V, and zoom in with Control plus. You can zoom out with Control minus as well. Another handy trick for navigating around Illustrator is the mouse wheel up and down is up and down on the screen, and if you hold in Control, the mouse wheel goes left and right. Okay, the first step is to add in the molecular weight marker information into Illustrator. So to do that, we'll go to the line segment tool over here, which is also the slash key above Enter. And just to the right of the blot, I'll click, and I want to draw a very short line, so a 5-point line tends to look good, and I don't want it to be vertical, I want it horizontal, so 0 degrees. I'll press Enter to draw that line. So right now this line has no stroke, so we'll change that to 1 point, so you can actually see it, and the color defaulted to black, which I like. So we'll take this, move it over, align it to the first molecular weight marker, and then we'll take it and copy it, Control C, Control V, and we'll press Control V once for each of the remaining molecular weight markers, and then we'll pull over the copied black lines to the side. And then we can align these vertically quickly by highlighting all of them and then going to the top and horizontal align center. So move those over and then make sure they actually are aligned to the markers in the blot. So something like that. And this one was going to be the average of the two bottom ones, so down around the bottom. Now we'll add in the numbers. So we'll go to the text tool here. You can also go to it by pressing T, and we'll click down. And generally, the font that I would use for making figures is Arial, regular 8-point. So we'll add in the first of the molecular weight markers, so 250 kilodaltons. Then we'll copy that, Control C, Control V, and do that for the rest of the markers. Now we'll correct these. It's generally fastest to take work that you've already done in Illustrator and copy and paste it and modify it than making things from scratch. We'll align these numbers using the horizontal align left tool and move them over. And generally you want these numbers to align to the actual lines, and you can achieve that by highlighting both a line and the number, clicking on the line again to set that as the anchor for the align function, and then go to the top and press vertical align center, and this will shift the number to match up with the line. We'll do that for the remainder as well. The final step is going to be writing a label for the molecular weight markers. We'll put that here. I like to have it just below the top of the blot and align with the numbers themselves. And the label will be kilodaltons. And I usually make this bold. We can align this here. Okay, now that we have the molecular weight markers, we can remove this lane from the actual blot image, because that would never be included in the final figure anyway. We'll go back to Photoshop, and we'll check what size this blot is right now. So that's Control-Alt-I to see the image size. And in particular, the height is 352 pixels. So we want to maintain that as we're cutting out that last lane. So we'll change the width from 450 down to 400 and maintain the height of 352. The way we do this is going back to the marquee tool, changing it from normal to fixed size. Then we'll set the height as 352 and we'll set the width to 400. Now we'll deselect whatever has been selected before and click just to the top left of the blot. Now it's selected a region pretty nicely that contains the bulk of the blot without these marker lines. So we'll copy that and paste it into your Illustrator document. Now you can align it up with the previous image of the blot. If you want to do it more automatically, you can select both and anchor to the old image of the blot here and vertically align center to line them up. Now we'll delete the old image of the blot, and here you have your first Western blot image with the molecular weight markers in exactly the correct location, which is quite important. Now you can move on to labeling the lanes, adding that artwork. So the first step is to take one of the text boxes and build out the label. Now each of these wells has VPS 13 driven from an ADH1 promoter. So I'll add that label in. And again, you see it's Arial regular 8-point. And as I was saying, some of the lanes have this construct, others don't. So I'll add in a new text box that has a larger font, up to 12-point, to introduce a plus sign for the lanes where VPS 13 is being expressed. And for where it's not, I'll add a minus sign. And these are alternating through the lanes, so I can copy and paste them. Okay, if you want to make sure that they're evenly spaced, you can highlight all of these symbols, and the distribute functions are right next to the align functions here. We could distribute them horizontally around the center, so they're nice and evenly distributed now. We can also highlight all of this and vertically align center to make sure everything looks even across. Now, the strains not only have VPS 13 GFP, they also have another construct. And this one is a little bit more complicated to describe. I have a full-length version of it as well as truncations, so I'll add more descriptive labels to the rest of this blot. To do that, I'll add in text and rotate it by right-clicking, heading down to Transform and Rotate. And I'll set the rotation to 45 degrees and click OK. So the first two lanes of full length. The next two have a version with residues from amino acid 53 to the end. followed by another 2 with 81 to the end. And the final 2 are 418 to the end of SPO 71. And again, I'll align all of these. I think that looks as clear as possible. The final aspect of labeling the blot is to describe whether it's the lysate or an IP and what you're actually blotting for. So this is an anti-GFP blot. So I'll add in a label at 8-point font, so anti-GFP. Optionally, you could include the alpha symbol for this, which I prefer to do, and to do that you would go up to Type and Glyphs and go down this list. Until you find the alpha symbol, and then double click on it to introduce the alpha symbol. So this is an anti-GFP blot, and it is the whole cell lysate. So I'll add that in as well. This I'll align to the blot by selecting both and clicking on the blot and pressing vertically align center. Okay, so this is how to set up one Western blot. The next thing that we're going to do is basically duplicate these steps for each of the other 3 blots that will make up this final co-IP figure. So I'll speed through that because it's just duplicating what we've already done, and I'll slow it back down for the final steps of aligning everything in the co-IP figure. Okay, so I'll slow it down here again. So what you see now is I've finished processing the remainder of the blots, and I've added on the labels of whether or not it's an anti-GFP or anti-RFP blot, and added all of the molecular weight markers to them. Now we're going to do some more alignments, so I'll align these other 3 blots to the initial Western blot using the horizontal align center tool. Similarly, I'll take all of these little lines and align them to one of the first dashed lines with horizontal align center. And same for the numbers. So I'll click on one of the earliest ones and hit horizontal align left. Okay, so now all of these should be aligned the same way. You can do the same for these blot headers. Select them all and hit horizontal align right. Now I prefer to have the whole cell lysate and the IP blots grouped together, so I'll push these together a little bit and squish these together as well. If you have a couple of molecular weight markers that are getting too close, feel free to separate them a little bit to improve the clarity of your figure. I'll make sure that these labels are also aligned to the blots as well. This is really the strength of Illustrator, to very quickly align all of these different features to make your figure look professional. I'll copy this label and add in that this is the anti-GFP IP. Now, to make sure that people understand these labels are referring to both sets of blots, I'll add in a new line. So this line will be longer, 120 points or so, and it'll be 90 degrees, indicating that it's vertical. And the stroke, again, will be set to 1 point. It appeared up here, so I'll move it down and place it somewhere like that. I'll drag it along until the line intersects with the edge of the blot here, and also intersects with the edge there, while maintaining it in a vertical position. So I think that looks pretty good for the whole cell lysates, and I'll align the whole cell lysate label to the line by clicking on the line and pressing vertical align center. I'll do the same thing that I just did up there, down at the bottom for the IP blots. And align these labels as well. Okay, and there you have it. That's how you put together a solid publication-worthy co-IP. Now, unfortunately, this co-IP is not going to go into any publication very soon, because even my positive control, we know these two proteins interact, my positive control coming out here was pretty weak. But you can see the results quite clearly when you put together a well-organized, well-aligned Illustrator figure like this. A couple of points: you should obviously save this figure right away, but also the blots that you processed along the way. It's a good idea to save each of these as individual TIFF files, just with some trivial name like blot 1, 2, 3, 4. Because otherwise, if in the future you decide you want to process them a little bit differently, for example, changing the brightness and contrast a little bit more, taking them out of Illustrator isn't necessarily trivial. And I'll give you an example of that right now. So say I wanted to take this blot here, this anti-GFP blot, from Illustrator and put it back into Photoshop. If I just click on it and copy it with Control-C, and head back to Photoshop and open up a new document, Control-N, the blot that I've copied on the clipboard is listed as 96 by 84 pixels at 72 pixels per inch. So that's quite a low resolution. And if I create that file in Photoshop and paste in that blot as pixels, which is the best way to paste something back into Photoshop, hit enter twice, and if I zoom into this, you'll notice it looks horrific. It's really fuzzy and quite clear that a lot of information has been lost. If you want to avoid this happening and you're later trying to copy a blot or image out of Illustrator, go into Illustrator and actually look at the blot size. So here, if I click on this blot and go to the top where it says image and click on image, there will be an arrow here pointing to the right, an arrowhead. And if you click on the show link info, it'll give you a rundown on the resolution, so it's still 300 pixels per inch, and its dimensions, so 400 by 349. If you take those and open up a new Photoshop document, so one that's 400 by 349 pixels, let's go do that now. Control N, and we'll open up one that's 400 by 349, and it's 300 dpi, and we'll maintain the grayscale of the blot. We'll create this. If you paste in your blot now, it'll be the correct resolution. So you can still go back from Illustrator to Photoshop, but you have to be very conscious of the type of Photoshop document that you're opening up. All right, I think that's all there is for making a CoIP figure. Thanks for listening. Hope this helps.